Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am like just so excited to be here and welcome to the Big O. I'm going to just give us a few minutes for everyone to maybe just come into the chat. If you feel free, if you want to just send me your name and just put it into the chat, that would be really, really appreciated. I like to know who I'm talking to, and we're going to be getting up close and personal in this conversation. So it's always a great space for us to be able to do that. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes. Welcome anybody who's joining in. Also, this is an open forum. Please know that if you have any questions, if anything jumps out, I welcome the exchange. Feel free to put it into the chat and I will get to your questions. It's an open dialogue. We can really interact. That's really how I love to run these things, is with the interaction in the space. So that'll be a beautiful space if you want to do that. And we are at 1:35. I just want to welcome everybody into the space and welcome to the Big O, tapping into your sensual sense. I am Carrie Goring, AKA Carrie Sutras, and I am a relationship and intimacy coach. And so if you are here and we are connecting, I am so grateful for you to be taking this time to dive into this topic of our orgasm in spaces of being. But before we do anything, I really would like us to just do a bit of a land acknowledgement. And I want to acknowledge the land that we are settlers on. And I want to bring awareness to 6 nations in particular, the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee tribes of their land to which we occupy. And for me, I want to bring further awareness to the power and spirit of resistance that the 6 Nation defenders are showing right now. They have mobilized to stop the Mackenzie Meadows Housing Development Project, which is now being called 1492 Landback Lane in the border. It borders the town of Caledonia. So this project for me needs to be brought front and center with awareness, because it is one of the many insurgencies that risk the sovereignty of the Haudenosaunee people and Indigenous people overall. It is in their sacrifice that we are benefiting. And I think it's always safe, and we must keep in front and center that when they come for one, they will come for all. It is our issues, and let's bring honor to the space of the Indigenous whose land we sit on. And just take a few minutes for us to be in that moment. I just take a deep breath in and I exhale in honor. And with that, I'm going to move us into the project of the Big O. Okay, there we go. So who is this person that's speaking to you right now? Well, I am Carrie Goring. I am a 3-time entrepreneur, and I specialize in businesses that are about intimacy and personal expression. I am also a woman with some juicy lived experience, and I offer that experience up to be able to add this uniqueness to the topic to which we are talking about today. And with that, my passion is about empowering women to step into their sensual sense and to shed some of this colonial and cultural framework that we have used to keep women from enjoying the freedom and the expression of our sexuality, and also allowing us to step into what the full potential power of our sexuality can be. It really is an impactful space that allows us to connect to the energy of God or of the universe, whatever it is that you call that higher space, and the divineness of those spaces. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, tonight. So another thing that I think is so amazing is that when we allow women to gather in places and have these kinds of talks and discussions, and we can really create a special kind of energy that I think is so important for us to exist in. We allow each other to just be together. And so in light and in spirit of that, for this particular seminar, we are going to try and talk with openness and spaciousness. And with that being said, what's in this circle stays in our circle, just so we know. It is completely a safe place for us. So with all of that, I think it's also very important that we bring some knowledge or just some awareness, and this may be a bit of a trigger alert, that some of the topics and discussions of what we're going to be talking about may, bring up some feelings, bring up some things that might feel a little uncomfortable. So I know that this is an exciting space, it's an exciting experience, but I think it's worth mentioning that there are potential triggers. And what I mean by that, and I'm saying a potential trigger alert, is that I really want to ensure that we are creating a safe and loving space. And this is a container. It's really a container that will bring in a beautiful experience, but there are potentials to be stepping into spaces that may feel a little uncomfortable or potentially make us feel really enabled into those heightened senses of ourselves. So with keeping that in mind, I think it's important for us to touch upon what a trauma response is. And I thought I would offer you up some quick resources that will help you navigate through this space if you find that you feel a little bit triggered, that it's bothering you a little bit as we move through it. And I'm offering out another small disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist, but I am a trauma-informed coach. So I will not claim to diagnose anybody, but this is a trauma resource tool. It's reducing your trigger responses. And these are just some tidbits that I'm going to offer to you, that if you find that as we're doing anything or talking about anything, it makes you feel a little uncomfortable. If that happens, please stop at any moment, step away from the screen, give yourself a moment, and just take a deep breath. Breathing is a fantastic way to ground ourselves, to bring ourselves back into the presence of the moment. I offer to you to really just offer yourself, if you're feeling a little bit heightened, to just touch a wall, touch a table, something around you that is solid, and just repeat to yourself safety, noticing that those things are real, that you are in your own element, that you are perfectly okay as you are standing in this moment. We are all here together, and you are in safety if anything comes up for you. And one of my favorite things, that if I'm feeling really triggered, is to actually touch myself. Give yourself a squeeze on the arms, give yourself a squeeze anywhere that you feel comfortable, maybe putting your hand over your heart. Just reassure yourself. Touch is a beautiful way to bring us back into presence, into our moments, into knowing that we are safe. So I thought that that would be a great step. And just take these things for yourself. I mean, they're just really great tips to be used in any moment. Giving ourselves that moment of breath helps, not just if we're triggered, but just when we need to center. I hope that helps. what we are going to be covering today, because I know you guys are probably like, okay, cool, this is sounding pretty good, but how do you really even teach somebody about the idea of orgasm and orgasming? What do you mean by that? Well, what we're going to cover today, I call our goddess zones, because I believe that it is so powerful when we have the information that talks about where our body's anatomy really lies. And in the reality of how we have been approaching the idea of pleasure and orgasm to date, it has actually been from a very male-centered point of view. What I want to challenge and discuss is it from a female perspective, a female point of view. And now we're going to talk about how our anatomy ties in to how we as women experience orgasm. So how it really works. And what I love, love, love is also, we're going to talk about the 5 principles of what makes holistic sex. What exactly is this idea of holistic sex? And how does that tie into the fabulousness of your orgasmic space? So let's keep going. We're going to get started. Holistic sex. So what that really means is that holistic sexuality is breaking it down into a realm to which we are building into a connection to ourselves. As we in society today, especially in Western society, we have this really weird relationship with our sexuality. You know, we are told, especially as women, that we are allowed to be sexual. And in fact, in some ways, it's celebrated to be hypersexual. But you better make sure you're not too much. When women have too many partners or that expression of themselves comes up, then we are judged. So we live in this very precarious balance of what we can experience in the realm of our sexuality. We are juxtaposed between the ideas of being, highly sexual, and then knowing that high sexuality has consequences that may leave us in tragic circumstances, whether it's with, an unplanned pregnancy, whether it can be with a mistaken relationship, maybe our reputations can be at stake. We grapple with what that space looks like in our truth. So what holistic sexuality really allows is us to start to create a container that will give us truth of who we want to be and truth around the exploration of our sexuality in a way that sits in safety. It's the concept of having a connection with yourself. It is about allowing the divineness of being just pure in this idea of sex and using it to delve into the truth of who you feel you want to be. Sex also, and when you think about it, just give it a thought for a minute, sex also connects us with others. The way that we are intimate with our partners, or the way that we are intimate even with ourselves, that is an expression of our truth. It is a divine space that we create, and it allows us to take a look at how we are going to project into the world around us. And when we are experiencing sexuality and building these intimate connections, it's a lifelong journey and a discovery of, when we are in the discovery of how and what we want to be in our sexual experience, it's actually a dance with intimacy, with building true connections with other people and other places. And there's a misnomer that we go with right now, I believe, in society, where we're just told sex happens, right? You're born knowing how to be sexual. And the reality of that is, and I always find it funny because, we'll go to school for math. We'll go to school to learn English. But somehow we just naturally think that we don't have to learn or dive into really exploring and becoming a master of the sexual space. And what I want to point out as a very much a tool, or not even a tool, as almost a rite of passage, that sex and orgasm can and needs to be learned. It's something that we can develop, just like you develop language, just like you develop, your bodies change and shift. So does the realm of how we want to exist in our sexual experience is. So that's something that I love about the idea of being holistic in our sexual practices. We also, when you are practicing in your sex life, we really want to model good examples. And I know that one may seem a little bit outrageous, but stay with me for a minute. And what I mean by that is that we learn how to be comfortable and how to create great orgasms from great examples and modeling. And just offering out another trigger alert, just because I'm going to mention some languaging that may be a little bit more challenging. But we in this world, as we talk about being hypersexual, we also really get our modeling from TV. We'll watch passionate TV on one end of the realm, and it's normally just, two people getting at it, and that's the end of it. And or there are realms where we move into, say, pornography. And we know that I often liken that pornographic actors or our sex workers that are working in that realm they're sex athletes. That is not the norm. And yet we hold ourselves up to these models that may not be really good examples for us as we exist in this space and time. So it's really also about figuring out and finding new models or heightened models of what it can look like for you in a personal space. In fact, you becoming your best model. So why do we need holistic sexuality? Well, when we look at that, it translates into the beauty of our universe. And that really means that when you are so grounded, when you are centered into the spaces of your body and into your pleasure, the universe responds to that. It builds connection. It opens you up. When we are in pleasurable states, we're in ecstatic states. And that ecstasy really allows for us to build into our creativity, into our world, into those around us, into all of the beautiful things that we have in our truth. When we are in the spaces of wanting to develop our holistic sense of who you are, you really create a connection that starts with you. When you are in pleasure, when your orgasm is centered, when you know you've got direct access to this place, you create a divine connection into your body. And many of us, especially our truth and reality in the busyness of our worlds, we spend a lot of time in our heads. We spend a lot of time in the thoughts that go on in the busyness of our days. But when you take time out to just center into that space of your pleasure, it allows you to connect your mind and your body in real time. And that means that you become a whole being, which is mind, body, and soul. All three of these spaces are so connected with who you are in the divineness of this whole universe. So I just want everybody to take a moment to breathe that in, to really relish in the divineness of why your pleasure and orgasm matters so much. It is more than something that we just take with a beginning, it has a beginning, a center, and an end. There's real value in taking the moment to feel into this space. Now, this one is we're going to talk a little bit about your goddess parts. And that is, we're going to take a real look at the anatomy of the woman and how it really functions for us. And what I mean by that is, honestly, the women's anatomy and our parts, our private parts, had never been mapped, really. It had existed up until the 1990s, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it really has existed in a framework that has been devised by a male-focused understanding. The early studies that were done studying sexuality and the rise of orgasm only focus mostly on the male experience, on how they rose from it. And some tidbits were given to women as we moved through and forward into this space. And with that, that experience changed up a little bit our truth on how we are looking at orgasm. And so what I want to do is give us a little bit more of a fuller picture so that we can offer the space of our truth and interject how women have orgasm. So I want to focus on the fact that our womanly parts are absolutely beautiful. The standard model of how we see women and how women's bodies really look is not always real. And it is so important for us. And I'm hoping that this is one of the major things you get from this experience and time with me, is that it is so time for us to claim and take back our own version of what we want sexy to be. It's not as defined by others. It is truly your individual experience. So we're moving right on in. We're taking a front-on view. And this is, ta-da, your vulva. And your vulva is an amazing, amazing space. Take a look at your diagram of your vulva right now. And I want you to imagine that the front parts of your body, of your whole system, is a porch. Imagine that you have this amazing temple or mansion, or anything that makes you feel really fabulous. And just imagine it has a grand front porch. What you are looking at is the whole diagram of what this space is. The parts that sit on the outside, so like your vaginal opening, is more of your inner part. But we want to start with what we call your outer lips, the labia minora. And that is kind of that porch that I'm talking about. Your inner lips are right inside of it. And like your outer lips, they can be of all different shapes and sizes, but they kind of need to be coaxed out of the space and time of your front valves or your frontal porch that we're looking at here. Your clitoris, we are definitely going to talk about, as well as your urethra. We will get to some of the details, but I just wanted you to take a moment to take a full visual of the beauty of what your outer parts look like when it is in all of its glory. So the vulva starts with, let me explain what it is. The vulva is an inclusive term for all the outer parts of your yoni. And your yoni is another word, and I'll be using it a lot more frequently as we move through this experience. The yoni is a sacred Sanskrit word used to describe our womanly parts. And the yoni is actually called in Sanskrit, the sacred place. So your mounds of Venus was the frontal parts of what we talked about. It's the fleshy outlines that sit along the front of the vulva. And you know, your scent is also a space that we don't talk a lot about, but the scents that we bring up, your mounds of Venus actually trap your scent. And it's full of all the cellular glands that allow for scent to be a part of your sexuality. We all emit pheromones, and you know what? we are a super clean culture now. And because we are in that super clean culture, we don't always talk about what a beautiful space our scents can be, but scent is supposed to be sexy. Now, we're going to talk about the labia, and the labia is the internal, there's a labia, the labia is the internal space that sits inside of your outer lips. The labia minora is a softer, much more sleek part. It's a lap of folds of skin that outline the entire space. And what's amazing about this is that it is full of a mucous membrane, and it really is a soft, needs to be coaxed out space that sits for your enjoyment. Now, it's not the first place as women, if we're talking about orgasm and wanting to bring ourselves to climax, we should go. It is just simply, though, this beautiful space that when it is ready to open, it is like a flower. It flourishes for you. And the outer lips are encasing of the labia. But what happens is the outer lips actually act as a protective measure, more so than what is to protect what's happening on the inside. Now, one thing about women's bodies and the shapes of everything that we have, there is no one size fits all. We are glorified and beautiful in all the different ways that our labias and our outer lips will show up. Sometimes the labia will be tucked inside of the outer lips. Sometimes it's tucked in, on the inner versions of the inner lips. And that is so okay. It's everybody has beauty in whatever way that they are defined and shown. Size does not matter for us at all. So our lips are covered with a moist tissue, and it covers all the parts of the vulva. And as I mentioned before, it can be very sensitive to touch. And so it's very important to avoid direct contact. It can also cause, if we're being too rough before we're ready for a moment, it can be a space that creates a little bit of irritation. So caution is always best. I want to point out how when we were looking at that first picture, there is also in the front of your porch a urethra that exists, and it is a actual hole. And a lot of pictures, it shows up kind of weird, like it could look like a slit, but it's actually a hole that we know that functions to pull our urinary tract system through, but it is also a very sensitive space. It actually retracts, which is such a fabulous way thing that the creation of the female body, it retracts inward when we start to get heightened and aroused. And that is one of the reasons why it is so important that before you're, getting to the point of penetrative sex, it really helps to make sure you're in arousal, because a lot of the times if we are having sex with somebody and we're not completely aroused, there's a lot of pressure that's put on the urethra, and that can also then cause uterine infections and issues that may happen along those ways. So there's a reason why being at the height of arousal before penetrative sex is a beautiful thing. So we're going to talk about now, as we're moving into, we're stepped onto the front porch now. And as we move into the reality of our beauty, we're going to talk about the vaginal opening. Now, the vaginal opening is normally called the vagina, but they're a little different. It actually houses the vagina. It's the outer layers that is normally the hole, and it moves us into the vaginal tract and then into our cervix. And we've got to talk about one of our favorite things, and I got to just drop it like this, everyone. I just got to say the one thing that I always find so incredible: 8,000 nerve endings. I got to drop the mic. I'll repeat it. 8,000 nerve endings. The female clitoris contains, I'll say it again, 8,000 nerve endings. It is the highest concentration of nerve endings anywhere in male and female bodies. We got the most, and I just have to counterface it. Sorry, guys, they only got 3,000 nerve endings. We have 8, they've got 3,000. And the wonderful thing about the clitoris is it's actually made up of the same cellular tissue that creates a penis. This gland of beautiful nestled nerve endings is covered by a hood of skin called the hood. And once again, depending on the woman, it can show up very differently. For some women, the hood completely will cover it. For other women, it may peek a little ways out. Other women, again, it may not be there at all. It's all once a beautiful space of exploration. And yet again, we are all unique and sit in the divineness of this space. And our clitoris does some amazing things. The clitoris needs to be broken down. So we sit down, we were talking about how the clitoris is contained in by a hood that shows the very peak. It looks like almost like a P at the top that the clitoris is surrounded with. And the clitoris hood connects to form the clitoris, and it will retract or not, depending on how you present, to expose the glands. If you have a hooded clitoris, it's so normal. As I mentioned, we are all very different. It all works, and it's exquisite pleasure. Now, the thing about the clitoris is most of us think it stops at the hood. Not true. We have an clitoral body, and it's all internal. And so what's amazing, and I just love this, is that we actually connect in, and it extends down into your whole vagina and down into the realm. So the clitoral body is more internal, and it will connect to the gland, and it's suspended like to your pubic bone, and it just travels down on 2 different sides. So that brings us to the next piece, which is called the corposa carnosa, which is the clitoral body has 2 sides to it. And it's like it will erect. There's actual erection tissue that swells and comes up very much like a penis. But we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. There's the parenchyra, which is a clitoral body that branches off to form 2 appendages. So it's almost like, imagine your clitoris has like a horseshoe shape. It has 2 legs that straddle your urethra and the vaginal canal, and it becomes engorged with blood when you are turned on. And it's also full of all these luscious nerve endings. Remember I mentioned 8,000? Don't forget those 8,000. The vestibular bulbs, they form an upside down heart shape, and it sits in the vaginal canal. So it's like a little bit of cleavage that forms right at your vaginal canal. And those bulbs reach through and behind your labia. So it goes around the vaginal canal and up towards the anus. So they also swell when you are hot and bothered. So what I want you guys to take from this as we're talking about it is that your body actually functions quite a bit like a penis. Yes, it does. We're going to get back to that one. I thought I would bring up something that I really feel needs to be brought into the awareness of most women. Is there is this huge myth about the hymen. And we are told as women that we have the hymen, which is a membrane that partially covers our vaginal opening. And it's presented to women as when we've broken our hymen, it's used as a moniker or a marker of our virginal capacities, and this idea that if it's broken, you may not be a virgin anymore. And we all have that myth I know I did. I think about my first time when, you know, you're supposed to bleed after being penetrated, and that this means that, you know, somehow I've lost my virginity. Well, yeah, maybe not so true. The role of the hymen is to protect the vagina from infection, but as you grow and move through puberty, it actually switches and changes form. For some women, it is completely absorbed into the vaginal opening, and for some women, it can leave tabs. So what this picture is demonstrating is how the lining thins out. And these are various examples of how when the lining thins out, it can present very differently. For some women, you will never have a full covering over your vaginal opening, as its role really was to protect for infection. But there are also so many other things that are in play for women that allow us to keep our vaginal opening, you know, safe and secure. And I just want us to take a moment to grasp the enormity of what this means. What this covering will shed naturally as we move through puberty. And for some women, it may never shed. It's once again that variety of who we are. And so we have based an entire understanding and put some pressure on not even ourselves, it's the colonial powers and you know, the process of a patriarchal system that has put these monikers on us. And what would it be, and I leave you with this thought, what would it be to offer to yourself a new understanding of this idea and switching up our programming that purity matters? What would it be for us to be able to just simply step into the power of our truth without worrying about how our bodies are presenting, that this idea of being pure and virginal, that's a myth anyway, doesn't have to be our truth. I leave that with you. The hymen ain't a hot thing, not at all. I want to talk about the perineum. Now, the perineum is the smooth layer of skin that exists between our vaginal opening and the anus. It is a tougher, more flexible skin. And when we were talking about the vestibules that exist, that's where some of that erectile tissue extends out to. That area is much more tough. It doesn't have as many nerve endings because it's the space that kind of takes a lot of the pounding when we're having penetrative sex, or if you are giving birth, there are some definite spaces there where you may find, you know, that there can be some tearing or, you know, it's a worn area. So it's been built to be a little bit more tougher and flexible for ourselves, but it is nonetheless an important space that also responds and just adds to the experience of our pleasure place. And when those erectile tissues that are housed about an inch inside of the perineum, it actually pulls back your vaginal opening when you are in the spaces of arousal to make that a much more flexible and responsive space for you to receive. So we've been talking a lot about this erectile tissues. I like to call it a erection. Just like men, we have erections and they look a little bit like this. So what happens is we have all of these tubular type cells and valves that open into a blood flow. And this diagram is explaining what that looks like. So the valves will open and the blood will flow through normally. And then as you get more aroused, what happens is with all the stimulation, all that good stuff, those valves will seal up. And then during the arousal process, the valves will close off fully. So the blood has flown in, but it won't be able to come out. And the trapped blood then expands and the capillaries swell, and you know that ends up being engorgement. And what that does though is it really allows those nerve endings to be triggered and for you to be able to be in the fullness of your erection, or in your space, correction. So as we mentioned, your clitoris is made up of the head, which is the part that has your hood, that area. We have the shafts that go down the sides of, the shaft that goes down the front and attaches to your head, which is your the actual glands for the clitoris. Then you guys can see all of the urethral sponge that exists in the area and how that would swell and create much more of an expansion for you. The urethral opening has sponge around it as well, which also functions as protection, but it also gives you an expansion of your pleasure. All of these erectile tissues now have nerve endings attached to it as well. And I think it's so important to remember that it is so much more than one space as our clitoris. Right now, we've got access to all of it. Now, we're going to talk about the idea of the elusive G-spot. So your G-spot is a part of your clitoral network. And this means that when you are stimulating your G-spot, you are stimulating a part of your clitoris. The G-spot is normally located, and you guys can try this for yourself after our talk, and I will invite you to really spend some time with your body if it feels comfortable for you. But the G-spot is a thing. Before there's been debates that it does exist for some women, or does it exist? What is it? It's been this like elusive idea. In all actuality, the G-spot is real. If you take your thumb and just insert it before you even begin there, let me back up a minute. If you spend some time and just get yourself partially aroused in whatever way you'd like, whether it's with a partner or on your own, get yourself partially aroused, and then just take your finger, your thumb is best I find because it's an anchoring finger, and just insert it nail down into your vaginal opening, probably about somewhere between half an inch to an inch. And as you feel into the space, you'll feel and notice like a ridged area. It can feel a lot like a walnut or like a little bit bumpy. And depending on usage or not, your G-spot is a real beautiful attachment and complement and enhancement. The G-spot is actually, they believe, the root of your glands stretching down and hitting the roof of your vaginal opening. And so if it is stimulated there, you are just touching the underlying space of your clitoris. And it takes practice, makes it perfect, but there is such a beautiful way to have another space to which we can orgasm from. Now, for most women, penetrative sex is not our greatest form, our way of hitting orgasm, even though that's what's been portrayed in our truth. It actually happens from direct stimulation of our clitoris and the clitoral hood. Most women, 70% in fact of women, will be much more stimulated and reach orgasm in the greatest way. It's like a surefire way to get there. But this G-spot space is a beautiful opportunity as well. And in fact, most of the time when we are talking about our G-spot, it's not that you don't have access to it. It's normally really what affects how much we get to activate the space is the distance that sits between your vaginal opening and your anal opening. That's really the difference. But with practice and usage and discovering that space, you can give yourself a whole-bodied orgasm. So there's the difference between how we experience orgasm, I think it should be brought up into this space. Women can experience orgasms in many different ways. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience where, you might have come to orgasm, or if if you're having the experience of it, but somehow it may feel a little flat to you. You know, you've had the outlay of this orgasmic space, but it doesn't feel full. That's because for women, we have this full gamut of choice of how we can be in the experience of orgasm. And we may focus on one thing or another, but when we use and choose the G spot or other areas that we can stimulate, that then gives us an opportunity to expand into what that pleasure can look like for ourselves. So this is another option for you. And I thought I would mention some tried and true self-pleasure tips and handy tricks that we can offer up for our enjoyment. And just like I mentioned with your G-spot to go in and just feel around, I offer to everyone just an opportunity to take a deep breath and just feel into your body. Give yourself an opportunity to enjoy this space. And here are some ways that you can go about doing that. Number one, I call pinch for the inch. And what this is to use 2 fingers and just pinch or just feel around your the top of your hood and actually around the head. What happens is that you'll find that you'll find pleasure that will feel really good for yourself. And taking some time to go in before you directly touch your clitoris is sometimes really beneficial because your clitoris is such a sensitive place that direct contact may be too much and highly sensitive for it. So starting on the outside, like using your 2 fingers and just pinching, figure out pressure points. Find out what works for you as you hold. Maybe you like it a little bit harder. Maybe it's a softer pinch. Playing around gives you opportunity to figure that out. Now, the second part I call orbit the planet, which is trace slow circles around your clitoris. Move around your clitoris sides, the labia, and feel into the sensations that come up. And what I mean by that is most of the time when we think about going into orgasm, most of us go in with like this idea of an intent. You know, we're going in to rub one out, so to speak. I'm offering to you to just take a little bit of time to set some time for yourself, to actually slow down the process and really feel into what is happening as you are touching your body. Make slow circles around your clitoris. Move around the sides. Take different pressure points. See what feels good. Is it a slow circle? Is it a fast circle? Take that moment to be in the pleasure of your body. The third part is I call fun zones, because not only is your clitoris or your whole erectile system, as we're going to call it, a part of your sexual process, your rest of your body is. We all have spots that feel good to us, and exploring them really builds connectors to your erogenous zones. When our erogenous zones are activated, it will connect into our erectile part system and allow us to enhance the expression and feel of our pleasure. Take, for example, I'm going to let you guys into a little well-known secret. For me, I have an incredible erogenous zone that sits right on the side of my back. As funny as that may sound, but when I get kissed in that area or touched in that area, it's like an electrifying, absolutely conjoining space to my clitoris, and it just sets me up. And I would never have known that if I didn't spend some time in exploration of my body. And what I have found is that is almost a surefire way to get me going. And we all have parts like that when we've connected into our bodies. Obviously, our breasts contain that erectile sensual tissue. We're all connected by what is called the vagus gland. This is a central gland that runs through your entire body. It's, sorry, the vagus nerve, I apologize, it's not a gland, it's a nerve. The vagus nerve actually runs through your entire body, and this nerve attaches back into those 8,000 glands and our nervous systems that we have. And so with that being said, that expansion really will connect you in. And of course, we're going to talk about when you're feeling all your good goods and you're all up in your space, another space that you can really maximize is going to penetration. And notice that I put penetration as the final thing that I put on this list, and good vibes and sex toys kind of fall into the penetrative space. But why I mentioned it last is because it really is just one part of this expression of our pleasure. And we all know that now that the clitoris extends down into our vaginal walls, it's only natural or can be for you to want to go in, but only when you're ready. Our bodies will let you know you actually have a divine calling that exists with your vaginal offering. And when you want to receive something, if you listen, your arousal is going to let you know when you're ready to receive. When we take it on too quickly, when we move into penetrative sex too quickly, you'll find your body will freeze up. And that can be in the spaces of why we get into painful sex and not experiencing the full pleasure. We may not be lubricated enough for that to happen, even though you can offer up your own lubrication spaces as well. That really does help in the penetrative process. But we're going to talk about this idea of good vibes and sex toys. Using sex toys and vibrators, which can come in a gamut and a variety of tools and handy things that you can use. And I mentioned them here because one of the beautiful things about holistically experiencing sex is to move into an idea of sexual reclamation. And what I mean by that is just being in pleasure, using whatever it takes to create a real space of pleasure for your body, and no holds bars. And being an exploration of that is a celebration of your truth. And it's actually a foundation. When we are using sex toys, or maybe it's erotica for you, but finding and giving yourself permission to figure out what it is that makes you feel good. What is it that turns you on in the maximum way? It is your right to be okay there. It is your right to be in that experience. There are things like crystal dildos. There are vibrators. There are massagers, to name a few. We have something wonderful called the jade egg, which is a very feminine-based experience. I didn't talk much about that, but just recognize that there is such a gamut of ways that you can move into pleasure and offer up a pleasurable space for yourself. So how do we get into the big O with all of that being said? Exploration, giving ourselves that space to be. Getting curious about our bodies is so impactful to really shutting down the mind. Remember and think about when you are playful, when you were a child and you just wanted to have fun, you would just go out there and do. And I'm not saying be like a child. Okay, maybe I am. Bring some of that childlike curiosity into the expansion, into your play, into your exploration. Stimulation. Now, we all know that to be able to get to orgasm, we got to be doing something to get there. So using our ideas of touch, using the idea and the spaces of stimulating ourselves through, whether it's through using a toy, all of those beautiful things add to the heightened expression of coming to our orgasm. And the one thing that I think we know is lots of practice. Whether you're good, bad, or anything in this reality, to become a master, we have to be ready and willing to practice at it. We are so trained to kind of make sex be on our back burner, to make pleasure be something we get to. I offer to you just a new way of thinking about it, that instead of it being something that we just kind of do, why not become a sex master or a sex mistress? Why not take this time to really hone in? Because like anything else, pleasure is activated in our brains. And when you stimulate yourself often enough, it will become like a natural way of being, because you will be setting up the synapses in your brain and in your somatic systems to connect into your body. So lots of practice is a good thing. Oops. I'm going to offer that to bring ourselves into some comfortable spaces with this, because I've talked about a lot here, an exercise that I want to leave everybody with. And maybe you guys can get back to me at a later date or not. But I offer you to explore your yoni space, a mirror exercise. So find a quiet space, a private space where you feel comfortable and safe, and take a mirror or a phone. Now, for me, actually, I really more so enjoy my phone camera. And I said selfie time, but you don't have to. But just turning on your phone camera and just spend some time looking at your yoni. Spend some time really getting comfortable with your space, your divineness, your connection to the universe. Really connect in, look and lavish her with love, lavish the space into your truth. Really give yourself permission to let go of some of that pre-programmed fear and just shame that subconsciously sits around our idea of our sexuality. Recognize how when we connect to it, when we offer true space and time, you're connecting back into yourself. Your yoni is so a part of you. The sacredness of what and who you are rests in the pleasure that you can give to yourself. I would love to hear how this exercise works out for you. And do it more than once. I offer do it about 3 times, because the first time it feels a little weird if it's not something you're used to doing. But getting connected is the key, whatever feels comfortable for you. So with everything that I've said, what does all of it mean? Well, essentially this: women in particular, we are built for ultimate pleasure. Can I go back to those 8,000 nerve endings? Those 8,000 nerve endings are not tied to anything outside of your pleasure. For men, they have a functionality to every piece of the structure to which they enjoy their sexual activity from. For us, the clitoris was simply built in for our pleasure. That's it. So there is nothing that says that we can't have multiple orgasms. And our orgasms, in fact, are not tied to any kind of ending, like with men. When men orgasm, they normally ejaculate and show's over for them, right? Until they can reset the next time. For women, we have no such ties. So for us, we can reset ourselves and go multiple times. Once you've connected in, you can physically and functionality train your body to come over and over and over again. I wanted to also point out that our clitoris don't affect the magnitude of the expansion of our orgasms or the orgasm experience. Clitorises come in all different shapes and sizes, so it doesn't matter, because while the orgasm is so much larger than what we originally believed it was, and we are connected to our clitorises through our brain. It can be experienced. We don't have a problem, ladies. Size does not matter. I wanted to send a shout out to Helen Colonial. She was a urologist that was stationed at the University of Australia, and she was the first person to anatomically map the clitoris. And so, and look at the date. This happened in the late 1990s. And I think it's so important to recognize this, because her work radically opened up the floodgates for women, for us to understand our experience of pleasure, which is phenomenal. But I also want to bring into the awareness how up until the 90s, our experience was so radically based in how men have perceived our space. It has been radically set up for us to believe in a very male-centered way of having orgasm with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whereas in reality, that is not our truth. We can have our sexuality in our way. And when you understand and know the expansiveness of our clitoris and what it can bring, and all of those erectile tissues that infuse with delicious pleasure centers for our bodies. And when you find the ways to truly do the practices, to try all of those different spaces and experiences, they will connect back in with your brain, which is your highest functioning orgasmic space. So just to wrap up, before we open this up for talk, is our biggest sexual organ is our brains. We as women in the divineness of who we are uniquely wired to connect to pleasure through our minds and our yonis. They are connected all. Our ability to bring forth life seems to give us an added connection to the divine spaces of love and pleasure. And just take a deep breath. Give yourself permission, because we should not be ashamed, as we have a gift that has been given to us by the divineness of who we are, by this universe, by this amazing space that creates us, or the consciousness that creates us. Because then if we didn't need it, it wouldn't be there. And if we weren't to be gifted it, it wouldn't be there. And so with that being said, we have a right to claim our power in choosing how we want to be in our sexuality. We have a power. We are righteous in giving us our moment to be. Pleasure is your birthright. Pleasure is your right to be. And I am just so grateful that we are in this moment in space and time where we can open ourselves up to it, explore, discover, be as you are. And thank you for listening to my presentation. I really, really appreciate your time and space. If you have any questions, feel free to just drop me a line. The question and answer box is open. I'd love to hear your thoughts, anything that may be coming up for you, any questions. I am open to it all. This is a very safe space, just to let you know. It's a very safe space for us to explore what's set in the circle, stays in the circle as you may want to be. I'll be on sitting, waiting. Thank you, Leona. I appreciate your feedbacks. I really do believe that it's powerful as women for us to take this moment. Leona McCollan said, thank you, no questions, but this was a great learning session. Dada Gazirable, I apologize. I am so horrible with names partially, but my intentions are all well. Thanks for the great presentation, Carrie. I appreciate your feedback. I really appreciate you letting us know and talking about this, because it is a valuable space for us to do that. Bringing awareness to our bodies is absolutely imperative as we start as women to claim the space for ourselves, not as we've been told. We're working through layers of, colonial and patriarchal pain. And as you start to pleasure and get into your spaces of your body, you start to claim back some of that. You start to heal some of what might have sat there and you're not even conscious of it, but it's a real personal experience. It allows you to be in the divineness of this space for yourself. Michelle is asking, any tips on how to support women survivors of sexual violence in the process of embodying their bodies and making sex a pleasurable experience versus a triggering one? Oh, love the question, Michelle. First thing that I offer up when we are talking about this is, one, working with, and if you're have experienced trauma and you're just coming into the realization of it, because this is very much a real space for many of us women, and I stand and witness and hold that space with anybody in that experience, if anybody in this room has been there. First thing we do is to seek help. Really offer yourself, if you're ready, if it feels in your moment, to go out and get a clinical therapist, somebody who has a specialty in therapy, and offer that space for yourself. And as you are in those moments of starting to work it through, especially if it's a very fresh wound, it's something you've just discovered, it's new to you. The second step then for you after you've moved through that is to start to embody and take a moment to be okay in your body. And how we do that is to acknowledge all the parts of us that exist. So what I have found is handy, because I myself have been a survivor of sexual abuse, has been to not push it away, actually. I have found that to survive an experience, we have built resiliency around those spaces. And what I offer myself is that I try to tap into those parts of myself that held whatever that experience was. So what I mean by that is I use a meditative kind of process where I breathe into my body. And when you've gone through a traumatic experience, it's tough sometimes to just be in our bodies. So working into my body space and just identifying that part of me that was the survivor, that part of me that wants to feel pleasure, even if I'm not yet, but wants it. And just offering that part some awareness and holding. And then once I've got that understood and there, what I offer is, if you are going to be moving into a sexual experience, whether it's on your own or with a partner, I normally say start with yourself. But if it is in the experience with a partner as well, before we even start, connect into that part that wants to feel pleasure. If you can identify it, and it's going to seem silly at first, identify her. give her a place in your body. So I call mine, her name is Smooth Carrie. There is a part of me that knows that I am sexy. There's a part of me that knows that I deserve my pleasure. And I use that part to sit in my space. And when I'm ready, when I'm wanting to move into a sexual space, I just move her forward. I will say, you know what? I've been through something and I know I have, but right now, that isn't who I am in this moment. That has happened. It's real, but there's this side of me that wants to come up. I know I can deserve pleasure, and I'm going to call on her to be front and center in the moment. She can hold and love that part of me that's scared. She can hold and love that part of me that's been through that. But that part can stay on the side for a minute. And what I'm explaining takes time. I also offer that up. Recognize that it's so okay to take time. When you go through a traumatic event, it locks itself into your brain. It locks itself into a pattern and it doesn't understand time and space. So it can often show up physiologically in the way that you express in your body. So when you just give it a moment and connect that might be happening when you're in an asexual experience. Like if one of the things is that you might find yourself clenching, if you can bring awareness to that and then offer up that part of you that wants to have the enjoyment, bring that front and center, move that space around and say, hey, I'm calling on that part of me that wants to be pleasurable. I'm calling on my Smooth Carrie to come forward and just hold this space. It's okay. I get it, but it's not my moment now. I'm in a loving space. I'm with myself. I'm enjoying my body. And another way that you can support that is through developing a self-pleasure practice. Not just pleasuring because you're having a horny moment. I'm just using blunt wording, but not because you're having a horny moment, but actually using the pleasure as a healing moment, using self-pleasure to get the connections back into your body by allowing and affording pleasure and love to be completely in the space of who you want to be. And so with that being said, I hope that helps you. A pleasure practice is a powerful tool to really center you back in and give yourself good touch, give yourself good spaces, using all of the tools, if we're going to use toys or all of those things, that is options for yourself, as well as creating and bringing forward that part of yourself that really wants to be in pleasure, and allowing that to come front and center to hold that part of you that is having the experience that may not have been so great for you. I hope that helps. Any more questions? Okay. I just want to offer in closing a deep breath, because some of what we processed may be a bit challenging. And if you just want to stay with me and we do this breathing together, I just offer just putting your hand over your heart for just a minute, just touching in, being in awareness of the touch of your heart, and just taking a deep breath with me in through the nose. Oh, wait, I've got 2 more questions. I apologize for that. Just feel into your heart and let's just exhale. And I'm going to take a look at the 2 more questions that we have. Where do we start the talk about our sacred body in an environment where we have been raised to never talk? much touch or even express pleasure in the open? That is a great question, Dada. I believe that that really does start with us touching. This is once again the pleasure process. It is such an imperative space to start because it goes beyond the talk. It's really about giving ourselves the permission. And even before we talk, I think we got to touch. Touch yourself in your private spaces. Create that space to be safe so that you can touch. Because what that does is when it becomes real for you, you lose some of the stuff around it, and then the conversations start to become a bit easier. Know that because you have the intention for it, it will just become your truth. Dada, oh, you're also talking about, are you available to talk to us as a group dealing daily with sexual assault victims to build without shame on our own dialogue, courage, and with no guilt? Absolutely. It's very much a part of the work that I do. I am so passionate, especially for women of color. We have epigenetic, we have these intergenerational pains. And what actually brought me to this work, and I will just share very briefly, was that I have seen a connection, a flow through my own family dynamic of intergenerational sexual assault and abuse. And I chose that it was going to stop with I have grandchildren and I have grandchildren. And for me, it was time to create a space where we shatter the paradigm and really connect back in for us so that we can offer a truth. So I'm absolutely available for that. It is my joy and passion to support women as we really start to reprogram ourselves and create a new truth of power for where we stand in our sexuality. It is divine. Thanks so much, Carrie. Can you talk a bit about women going into menopause phase of life and the beginnings and lost feelings of sexuality? In other words, how identifying with your sexuality can change. Oh, this one, thank you, anonymous attendee. I so appreciate the question. Personal for me. I am so in this. I am so in this space. We talk a lot about our periods and coming into our moon cycles, get menstruation, but we so don't talk about what happens as we move through the seasons of our lives and we hit menstruation. I am actually perimenopausal right now. And in fact, I've been shocked that through this whole episode, I haven't had to flash off this sweater because my hot flashes are a very real thing. And what I can say and offer, because I too have worked through the challenges of this, I come back once again to this is where having a pleasure process is an incredible, a pleasure practice, sorry, is an incredible offering for your body. Because when we have the pleasure practice, what happens is there's that connector that happens with the brain. Your body, you'll start to be able to touch yourself and just connect with your brain, right? So no matter how we are going through the seasons of our bodies, and I also want to touch upon that, but I'll come back to it. Once you have the connector and you are in pleasure, you'll be able to just turn on even as the hormones are starting to shift. And I also want to bring into awareness something that I don't think we touch upon very much. We are very much celebrate in our culture and in this realm the idea of being on all the time. The idea that being sexual means that we've got to be hot and bothered and ready in any moment. But there are some traditions and understandings that celebrate that we have ebbs and flows, that we move almost like seasons. So there's a summer where you are on and we are in the middle of everything and it's beautiful and all of that good stuff. But there's such beauty and value when you're in the fall. Think about what it's like when you're in the fall portion of your reality and we're doing the harvest and we're watching the leaves change. There's beauty in being in that reality. And when we're even in the winter, even when things are seemingly dead and it seems isolated and quiet, there's always stuff percolating underneath the surface. In our sleep and rest, there's a moment of replenishment, of rejuvenation. And it's very similar for us, even when we are in a menopausal state. It's not that it's different or challenging. What it is we're just ebbing and flowing and evolving into another phase of our womanhood, of that wisdom, of that glory, of that grown folk business that happens when we are feminine. There's a sensuality that can trigger and be brought up if you allow our bodies, if we allow our bodies to just be in it. And so I think that a big portion of this is about being in tune with what is happening as we are moving through that interconnection and the change, being one with it and listening to how our body is responding and playing up on that space without giving it too much pressure. Because them hot flashes can get real high. And sometimes it works for you, but other times you just want to cool it down. So I completely understand and relate. And once again, I hope that offers you some tips. I really find that for me, intentional practice has made me be able to flow through that space very readily. As much as my body is changing and my hormones are dipping, I just work with that and I'm okay. It doesn't always, also recognize that orgasm doesn't always have to mean an end. Pleasure should be your end. Doesn't mean you gotta have to climax, but that's a whole other conversation. Thank you. Thank you for all of the questions. We've got 5 minutes left. And oh, if you would love to contact and connect with me, I can be found on Instagram on @KerrySutras, Kerry. I'll put it into the chat right here. Oops. I can be found at kerrysutras.com. This is my website. I can be found on Instagram at @KerrySutras. I am actually going to be running on Friday. If you'd like to connect with me, send me a DM or send me a DM. That's probably the best way to get me, or you can email me at kerrysutras.com. I am actually running with my fabulous co-facilitator. Her name is Danica Shaw, and we are running something called Yoni Palace, which is the beautiful space for women of color to finally create a safety and find our sexy. We are going to be offering this event on Friday. It's a free mastermind kind of program where we're going to come in. It's going to be offered at 8 o'clock. You can just register if you go to my website, or if you hit me up, I could make sure that you get the registration link. And let's connect in. Join me for that event. It's this Friday, October 30th. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the experiences of you. I hope that you have garnered some expression, a little pep in the step. Give yourself the permission to be. And I so appreciate this time that we got to spend together. It's been some great fun. Thank you.